Alpha Pokemon were first introduced within Pokemon Legends Arceus, which took place in the Edo period, during a time when Giratina's power wreaked havoc upon Hisui. But then they completely disappeared in lore. Now, over 200 years later, Alpha Pokemon have returned to Lumiose City, a place overrun with mega energy, so full of said energy that physical crystals form everywhere, foretelling a dangerous event that is set to occur here. And now through this link and following the trails through Alola, Galar, and Hoenn, I could bring to you the truth about mega energy. Howdy there, I'm Krillic, and this is a story that will span 3,000 years in lore. A story that will include spoilers, of course, so you've been warned. This is because I have to talk about the end of Legends ZA to even properly discuss this topic. And I mean the end, not just the climax of the story, no, the final missions. We're gonna jump around a decent amount through the timelines as well, but bear with me, and how about we begin with our first marker 3,000 years ago with the advent of the machine that gives life that was then transformed into the ultimate weapon. So you know the story. AZ loses Floette to the war, Floette dies in the war and is returned to AZ in a coffin, and then AZ does everything he can with his genius mind to build a machine that will give life back to Floette. The first form of this machine is incredibly important to note, because it was not actually intended to be a weapon at all at first, though it was still powered up by using the life energy of Pokemon. In fact, these stones that we have seen since X and Y are the key to this. These very stones aren't Pokemon, but are actually just this physical object that absorb life energy from the world around it naturally. But when a Pokemon is attached to them, I don't know, with like duct tape, I guess, then what happens is, when the ultimate weapon is activated, it causes the stones to take life energy from the Pokemon and release it, allowing the ultimate weapon to then intake said energy released into the world. And while this is just recently explained within Legends ZA, it was something that was long explained in the Pokemon Adventures manga. It was sitting right in front of us the entire time. That and a couple of other 100 things that are now in Legends ZA. All I'm saying is that everyone should start reading the manga. It's the best media that Pokemon has, hands down. I only have the red and yellow arcs covered, but I'll get to the rest of them eventually. But I digress, because what this does tell us is it tells us exactly what I had been suspecting all along, that this machine that AZ built contained both Xerneas and Yveltal. To explain better, especially now that Legends ZA makes it incredibly clear for us, Xerneas not only represents life, but is the one who gives, a Pokemon that bestows life and even immortality upon others. It has given energy to Deontay directly, which allowed it to Mega Evolve. It has given energy to the Pokemon of Lentil within Pokemon Snap, which has resulted in the Illumina phenomenon. And even now in ZA, it has attracted Alpha Pokemon to Lumiose City in some capacity, because that last portion is only known once Mabel informs us of anomalous Alpha Pokemon that are appearing within 3 area zones. These Pokemon don't normally belong or inhabit these zones and are a Steelix, a Gallade, and a Pangoro. Now, I know, again, we've already jumped from 3,000 years ago to present, but this is the best way to talk about it. I was really hoping there would be an easier tie with the 3 of these Pokemon, but at the very least, they are all Pokemon, in terms of game mechanics, that require special methods in order to evolve. For Steelix, you need to trade it while using the Metal Coat. With Gallade, you need to hand off the Dawnstone to a Kirlia. And then for Pangoro, you need another Dark-type Pokemon on the team, and for Pancham to be of the right level. Each of these 3 Pokemon, in other words, require extra energy in order to evolve. Trading Pokemon allows that metamorphosis to occur, whether it be by applying Steel, combining with Reaper Cloths or Duskmire, or simply the general energy resulting in a brand new form like Machamp. That is the extra energy that happens during the trade. Some people might say Pokemon are sad and desperate, changing in the moment to seem valuable before they're left behind with somebody else. But in the themes of Pokemon, that wouldn't make any sense at all. Instead, I posit that trading a Pokemon to someone else is an act of trading a Pokemon to someone who really, really wants it. Like, if someone trades a Haunter to me, I'm going to be incredibly excited to get it, even if I didn't know that Gengar existed at the time. As a result, whether it be through the bond I have with the person I am trading with, or my excitement for the new Pokemon, it then absorbs that positive energy and evolves. This energy from people to Pokemon with positive emotion is incredibly common, but we'll come back to that later, so that way I don't go too far off track. But this same logic can still be applied to Pangoro, energy between Pokemon allowing Pancham to evolve as it emulates those it looks up to, being other dark types, and then evolving. But the last of our little trio here of anomalous Pokemon is Gallade. This one is arguably the most interesting connection because, as stated, you have to use the Dawnstone in order to cause it to Mega Evolve. Not only that, but Gallade can Mega Evolve, and then, to tie things together further, we already knew that the power of the ultimate weapon had actually caused the evolution stones within the world of Pokemon to become Mega Stones. What I love about this is that this is actually acknowledged in a very indirect way within ZA, as within Lysander Labs you can find a number of whiteboards that are studying evolution and evolutionary stones. You can see Helioptile on that whiteboard amongst the old depictions of old Pokemon, how they used to be depicted in the earliest games, and what the connection between energy, mega energy, evolutionary stones, and everything else, and how they actually interact with each other, or what that connection is. Now, evolution stones have been depicted to be found underwater, to have an infinite version within the manga, to be underground, and so much more. This would explain why Mega Stones are found all over the place as well, but more importantly, it gives us our first clue. The clue that with just a little extra energy, or rather a lot of extra energy, the Mega Stones can be formed. So back to 3,000 years ago, back to this ultimate weapon, and back to Xerneas. The weapon is fired once, and through all the energy that had been collected from other Pokemon, it allowed Floette to come back to life. The residual energy also allowed AZ to live for 3,000 years. He was effectively immortal, but as I often stated, he wasn't actually immortal. He was just a very small container with a lot of life energy inside of him. Energy that would eventually run out and lead to his death, which this is one of the things where I'm just not happy to be right about. It was the right decision writing-wise, but that moment was depressing. And actually, L, or rather the ex-Lysander, now that he's still alive, even says himself, well, I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do for the next 3,000 years. Maybe I will see this beautiful world that I wanted to create and failed to truly understand. Nevertheless, now, there's another important piece of this puzzle, because it was always assumed every stone leading up to the ultimate weapon was a Pokemon, a grave, when it actually kinda wasn't. And once again, the Pokemon manga laid this all out for us long before Legends ZA showed it to us, because it stated that the Pokemon whose lives were taken to revive Floette were all turned to stone. And while yes, we see this with even Ash in the Mewtwo movie, it's within the manga that we also learn that this life energy is something that will naturally return to Pokemon over time. That these Pokemon that were turned to stone will eventually recover and be fine again. But the problem is how long they may be in this catatonic state that they're in. If they're like this for too long, it would potentially kill them or affect the ecosystem dramatically, become a world without Pokemon, and the world would just cease to exist. In other words, the flow of life would eventually bring them back. Xerneas, though, would eventually release enough energy back into the world in order for these Pokemon to rise again, but that can only be done with the help of Yveltal. Although technically, Yveltal is not actually 100% necessary for that, but unless you want Big Daddy Zygarde busting down the door for disrupting the balance of life and death, then you're gonna wait to Yveltal to take in some life energy before Xerneas gives life again. And that's exactly how it works. Yveltal, the one who takes, the representation of death itself within the world of Pokemon. It doesn't kill, but takes life energy, which Xerneas can freely reallocate into new life, into rebirth, which, now that I realize it, that effectively means that reincarnation is canonical within the world of Pokemon, which It kinda is anyway with Pokemon like Yamask and I guess Mystery Dungeon if you want to go that way. As if the Buddha white hair that is Calyrex and Spiritomb weren't enough to prove all of that already. Nevertheless, this completes our circle. Yveltal is used in one part of the machine that AZ built, used to take life energy from the stones, from the world, so on and so forth, while Xerneas is in the other part, bestowing concentrated life. This would explain why these stones react the way that they do. Normally taking in life energy that can then be used passively, but then when a Pokemon is attached to them and the ultimate weapon is on, they can take energy from the Pokemon and release this energy they have built up. Think of it as a natural reservoir of life that we should not be able to access at all. After all the documents do say this is a weapon of higher power, of the gods. But because of AZ, everyone and their mothers are aware of this power, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Instead, we could focus on what follows after the ultimate weapon, which is the creation of Anj. AZ was a smart man, because even after he ended the war, he did not just disappear into the ether. Sure, he may have wandered the world for 3,000 years, but he wasn't gone. I felt so vindicated when this was stated officially, though that excitement didn't last forever as we learned about Anj. Anj was created 2,000 years ago when AZ had met with a man of great power who had then asked AZ to create something to protect Kalos. Though instead of making another device that would take, as the ultimate weapon did, it would be instead something that would share the eternal life that Floette held within it. And so AZ did create it. He effectively built Prism Tower, and at the top, he held a throne where he would effectively Mega Evolve Floette, and through the use of Floette's flower, they could draw out the life energy within Floette and give life to Kalos or even further beyond. But he never really united with Floette to be able to do this at any point in time until the very end, and he still wasn't the one to do that. Within the end of the game, we find that this energy is so powerful that it is the reason for the Mega Crystals appearing everywhere. The reason why Mega Pokemon are appearing randomly, and it even uses Floette's power to blast off Lights of Ruin at the peak of its power at its own will. This massive, seemingly sentient flower when it's in its hyper-rogue state is said to just be a machine, but I've come to conclude that Anj is both the machine and the flower that Floette has. A flower long extinct, but also rare in the times when it was plucked by AZ's mother and granted to his Floette. Because of this, I will continually claim that Anj may also be AZ's mother's name. And we now have Anj, the actual giving machine, if you would. Though due to giving too much and giving all this excess mega energy, it went into a hyper-rogue state as it was trying to absorb it all back with our assistance. This state not only caused the aforementioned issues with Mega Pokemon appearing all over the place with excess life energy, but is also likely the primary reason for all the roots that were appearing all throughout Lumiose. In other words, the Mega Energy, which is derived from life energy, can be granted to more than just Pokemon that Mega Evolve. It can be granted to plants, it can be granted to people, and it doesn't need to cause Mega Evolution. Instead, we've been given the advent of Alpha Pokemon as well, returning to our world once more as an additional effect of this excess life energy. But instead of speaking on alphas in the modern day, how about we continue our walk through time and take a little side trip to a special place that AZ visited before he even went to Hoenn. 20,000 years ago, an injured Eternatus crash-landed upon the lands of Galar. 3,000 years ago, it rose up and caused the darkest day, and AZ witnessed this event. Now, it doesn't necessarily say whether he witnessed it from the area of Kalos itself, or if he went to Galar, so it's kind of a toss-up. Now, Eternatus was weak for some unknown reason, and I'm kind of terrified to find out if another more powerful Pokemon defeated it and slammed dunked it into Galar, because this eldritch creature was already a major threat. Now, there are a lot of theories as to how the ultimate weapon may have affected the world, and this is my current working theory, that the release of energy into the world has had a multitude of different effects. It is raw life energy being dispersed into the world after all. This life energy is then absorbed by many Pokemon in many different ways within many different lands. These Pokemon then become mass conduits as they then begin to affect the world as we know it. And in terms of Eternatus, the firing of the ultimate weapon was a phenomenal opportunity for it to rise up and absorb as much of this energy as possible. This would revitalize it. This would allow it to be so full of energy that it could convert it into the radiation adjacent energy that are the Galar particles. It intakes the energy and transforms it into something more powerful, or at least something different. And this isn't the only time that this happens within Pokemon. We have Terapagos using its energy to create the Terastal phenomenon. We have Rayquaza mega evolving on its own from the wishes of people and technically eating meteors. There are Kyogre and Groudon absorbing energy from the planet and transforming into their primal forms. There's Aura that humans and Pokemon can master. And then there's Z-Power, which originates from Ultra Necrozma. All of these forms of energy are just the excess life energy that is then transformed and released by each of these Pokemon to then affect the world as a whole, or at least regions. And even then, other Pokemon and humans continue to change and transform said energy to fit their needs. In the case of the Galar particles, Pokemon are irradiated, quote-unquote, by the effect and transform into their gigantic forms, but then humanity actually manages to also use it as a form of energy. As a side note, it turns out if we read the manga, Rose was right, which is a wild sentence to say, but it was worse than he ever explained in the games, because Galar wouldn't just face a quote-unquote energy crisis. Its people, its Pokemon, everything would disappear in 1,000 years. But even in as little as 10 to 15 years, the downfall of Galar would begin. That is why he actually acted the way he did, and I hate the games just a little bit for not giving us that information. Either way, Eternatus becomes Eternamax and blasts those particles all over the place, right? Now, AZ doesn't explain anything about his role in Galar, as it's just a line he states during the end of his life on his own. In fact, it was such a quick line during the important moments, or such an important moment, that it took me a moment to even realize what I had read out loud. I had to pause a couple sentences after I had read it, and then it processed. And to be entirely fair, Rogue Mega Energy and the G-Max Phenomenon's energy have very similar colors with each other for their themes, so it would make sense that this energy is exactly as I keep stating, a corruption or transformation of Mega Energy or of Life Energy. But let's take another step forward in time to a place we are long familiar with on AZ's travel. Before we do continue, I do just want to say thank you for watching. This is a lot of new information as we reach a new age of Pokemon theorizing and information, so if I miss anything, let me know in the comments, because it's the only way we can actually solve mysteries together. Otherwise, leave a comment anyway, because comments and watch time are the best way to boost a video freely. That, and I guess the new hype thing that they have going on. The algorithm doesn't even know what you say, it's just happy that you comment, so you can tell me about your day, or a recipe if you'd like. I like cooking. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month, as it helps the channel immensely, as I don't have a team to help me with these videos, but would love to continue increasing quality and expanding the channel to bring better content to you. But enough of that. Thank you again, and back to the video. So we knew since Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, that AZ had traveled to Hoenn, though we never really knew why. Well, it turns out that 1,000 years ago, AZ had visited Hoenn and planted a tree in front of the Cave of Origins entrance. A primal energy-filled meteor struck the region, creating a giant crater which Lumiose City will eventually later be built in. Primal Groudon and Primal Kyogre awakened to fight over all this power floating out into the world. And the people of Hoenn then wished on Rayquaza to save them once again, and using a special meteorite, what we would understand to be the Keystone, Rayquaza performed the world's first Mega Evolution, defeated these Primal Titans, took away their primal states, and forced them back into Night-Knight. Later on, the Sky Pillar was built in Rayquaza's honor, and the Draconids promised to pass down the prophecy that in 1,000 years, the meteor would return again. Though, before AZ left, he is quoted to have said, "It is the Delta, born of the great disturbances in this world. by the bonds born of mankind's wish, and the power of the stones, it will calm the troubles that plague the world. Do you know who else has a very similar description? Mega Zygarde. Its own Pokédex states, in response to people's emotions during an unprecedented crisis, Zygarde Mega evolves and calms the situation with its unmatched power. The thing is, AZ saw Mega Zygarde from a distance, all because he passed away once peace was actually restored to Lumiose, but we never get to hear any additional words from him regarding this. Though we can come back to this Mega later, how about we continue to focus on Rayquaza for now? Because when the ultimate weapon shot off its beam of destruction, or maybe even the beam of life for that matter, it passed through the atmosphere and into space before arcing back down and crashing upon what was assumed to be Kalos, and wherever it did land, nothing would be left behind. Would be a little funny if it turned out to be the Ore region, you know, the desolate little Arizona of the Pokemon world, but through this energy passing up through the atmosphere, you know the guardian of said atmosphere is going to be real upset about the new hole in the ozone layer. This would also explain why he is aware of Rayquaza to begin with, because he did encounter our dear Sky Serpent before its Mega evolution within Oris. This is all assuming AZ isn't just being super cryptic and throwing out titles upon first meeting a Pokemon, but I don't think he is. He's fairly straightforward throughout the ZA game, or he simply just doesn't say anything at all and leaves people to their own devices while maybe giving them some level of advice, like we should hear them out, we should see who they are completely before we make a rash decision. So then, knowing that Rayquaza eats meteors containing Mega Stones or Mega Evolves through the collective wishes of humanity, then there's only one thing I can think of that would make sense for our timeline here. Rayquaza arrived after the firing of the ultimate weapon, which time unknown. May have then had a role in keeping humanity and Pokemon safe during the resulting crisis if it was after the second firing, and AZ witnessed its power and how it brought peace to those in need, thus allowing him to explain to the lore keepers of Hoenn that Rayquaza is this Delta Pokemon as he describes, though he would not have seen it Mega Evolve in that moment. Now, whether you believe that theory or not, there is still one thing we can't deny, and that is Rayquaza was able to use Mega Energy for its own power and Mega Evolve 1,000 years ago, and then use this power to quell again those raging titans of Primal Kyogre and Primal Groudon. Those two individuals gain their power from the natural energy that exists within the planet itself, which is incredibly strange to think about considering that Zygarde draws its own power from the planets, and whether this is actually the same energy or completely different isn't exactly clear. But this shows us how AZ affected Hoenn, affected the Super Ancient Trio, and again, another example of how this energy is being dispersed and used. But let's take a bit of a jump here, and again, I apologize for all the moving forward and backwards in time, but bear with me, especially as we jump between regions again and again, because now that we've established a lot of information on how this life energy is being transformed, we need to talk about how around the same time that Anj was built, Paldea's empire was established. And within Paldea, we do have Terapagos. That big ol' crater in the center of Paldea is a real doozy, and it cracked open due to seismic activity. Every Terapagos that we are aware of fell, and only the Terapagos that we know is the sole survivor, and at least that's what the games want us to believe, but that's irrelevant to what I'm talking about here. Now, Terapagos kept itself alive by encasing itself within its terrestrial shell, an innate ability that it does have. But this tiny little turtle, it's actually kind of a big turtle, I gotta be real with you, not only kept itself alive deep underground, but also somehow managed to extend terrestrial energy through Paldea in its entirety and turn its environment into pure crystals. This Pokemon does eat, by the way. It's a very cute little creature in the anime, but nevertheless, it does eat, meaning it does have to use energy, has to consume energy, and yet somehow it otherwise has sat in this hole in the ground and produced seemingly infinite amounts of energy for Paldea to use for their Pokemon battles or to create multiversal time machines and AI replicas if you're Turo and Sada. Doesn't really make much sense, does it? And you may now be asking, what if Kalos really did fire the ultimate weapon upon Paldea? After all, the crater at the center of Paldea is about the right shape it needs to support this idea. To explain better, I've talked about this in my Ancient World of Pokemon video, but while I can line up real-life animals, extinction events, and the real-world timeline with the world of Pokemon very reliably and accurately, this Paldean crater makes no sense within our timeline. It matches the look of the Cheeks-Kloob crater. I can never say it right. It looks like what would happen after a meteoric impact, and it's something that would have happened long after the seismic shift had occurred, allowing the impact to not only create the crater, but also open up this underground world full of vibrant life. But here's the kicker. There's not a single meteoric event that occurs within the necessary time frame that matches Pokemon's timeline and the real world timeline. In fact, it is stated that this crater appeared 1 million years ago, meaning this crater is an absolute outlier in terms of history. But why did I spend this time talking about it? Because it's important to talk about all the possibilities we have at hand, and unfortunately, this means that this crater was not created by the ultimate weapon. Though, before we leave here, there's one other significant detail that may still tie to AZ and the history of Paldea. Because at some point during the time of the Paldean Empire, forts and watchtowers were built to watch on its neighboring countries during times of war. This could be due to Kalos still being significant in terms of its advancements, and other places being in war with them, Kalos being in war with Paldea, we don't really know. This doesn't tell us who Paldea's enemies were, but bad blood can still run between nations even after hundreds or thousands of years and ceasefires are called. In addition, at some point, a merchant from the east traveled to Paldea and sold to the Paldean king 4 treasures from a faraway land: a vessel, a broken sword, a set of wooden tablets, and a set of beads. These 4 treasures were in reality Pokemon which, due to the king's greed, were awakened and went berserk, causing a disaster that almost destroyed the kingdom. And now these are our ruinous quartet, which are based on the real-life items that account a terrible history of the real world, a sacrificial bull, the only way that this history could actually be recorded being on those wooden tablets, and so on and so forth. And it's really interesting to keep in mind that the king's greed awakened these Pokemon, but didn't create them. They may have been created from the innate negative energy that exists within the world and just needed to be put into the right catalyst, being this greedy king's domain. And at some point after the treasure's awakening, the Paldean king called out powerful Pokemon wielders that managed to defeat each of them and then seal them away in shrines across Paldea. A region from the east is not one that we're currently aware of, being a region where these came from, but if AZ is traveling around the world and was already asked by a powerful individual, quote-unquote, as the game states, to build Anj, then there's always the chance that he may have had some impact on the Ruin Quartet. He may have been one of the people to help seal them away. Now, after all of this, hold on, there are 4 immortals. We only know of 3. Kogita, Volo, AZ. L is a new one. It'd be kind of cool if, I know I'm going way off script here. It'd be kind of cool if our 3 immortals were 3 of the people who helped seal those ancient demons away because of their effect on the world that they've had so far and their vital roles that they do play, especially with Volo's change of heart that happens. Now, back on track after all of this, we can finally discuss the first currently known instance of Alpha Pokemon. We need to walk through the history of Hisui in order to understand the Alpha Pokemon and the Noble Pokemon, because I have some claims to make regarding their existence in relation to each other, which I've kind of been making this whole time to be fair. But to begin, Hisui is a bountiful land, a land that reminds the writer of the old verses of Sinjo, describing it as wintry and austere, basically saying, hey, it's cold out here and it's harsh, but man, does it feel like home. Now, I won't be reading everything from the old verses since I have an entire video called The Divine Truth, which breaks down each of these verses bit by bit, and I'm only just going to bring out the most important pieces here. For beginners, these verses explain how humanity can never stand up to Pokemon. No matter what, Pokemon are more powerful and it is only with the assistance of Pokemon that we could ever begin to stand a chance against them. And so, to make things fair, Arceus cast down 10 bolts of light, or lightning, that struck down upon the lands and struck 10 different Pokemon. These Pokemon would then become our noble Pokemon, the ones that would pair with not just humanity, but the hero of Hisui, a man that we have come to know as an ancestor of Champion Alder, or at least inference such information. Though the key verse that I think provides us an incredible amount of insight is the following: 10 Pokemon, the ancient hero's loyal retinue. Though these companions now are gone, their noble duty passes on to generations new. This is exemplified through the Growlithe that we see become Arcanine and then gain the role of being the noble of the Cobalt Coastlands. Though it was also in this process, or through this process, that we get to see lightning crack down onto it from the space-time rift, and we watch it become aglow with golden power and lose control of itself. The interesting thing is that even without this phenomenon, this Arcanine and each of our other noble Pokemon are massive in size. They're stronger and revered to be Pokemon that are smarter, wiser, and overall incredibly important to both the Diamond and the Pearl clans together, despite their separate beliefs of the Great Sinnoh being different gods. In addition, they can pass on their noble DNA to their next of kin, which sounds a lot more like, again, genetics are at play, does it not? And don't misunderstand what I'm trying to say here. I'm not claiming Arceus didn't cause noble Pokemon to come into existence, but rather the effect that Arceus had is something that might be able to be passed on in a genetic fashion. But if that were the case, then why can't we breed alpha Pokemon into existence? Well, you could say it's because the 2 Legends games we have don't have breeding as a mechanic within the games as our other mainline games do, but it's more than just that. Because in the modern day, it is said that alpha Pokemon were known in the past, stopped existing, and now they're suddenly appearing all over the place again. Meaning it really can't be a genetic trait as we might think, or even the people of Hisui might think. Rather, it is what occurs when an excess amount of energy is granted to a Pokemon and they are able to convert it within their bodies to become something new, granting them this alpha form. Think of it this way. We know that Arceus' light, more specifically the energy it granted, was able to give the noble Pokemon their form. Very similarly to how Xerneas naturally grants the energy that becomes Mega Energy, as again seen with Diancie, or any of the evolutionary stones that then become Mega Stones. But within Hisui, Giratina opening up space-time distortions causes bolts of lightning to rain down on the lands. These bolts of energy cause noble Pokemon to go on a rampage. And while alpha Pokemon are never explained as to how they actually come into existence, we have only ever seen them during times when excessive amounts of energy are poured into them or the lands around them. This means that Giratina caused lots of energy to be released into Hisui, which resulted in alpha Pokemon, and the extreme amounts of Mega Energy within Kalos in ZA is causing the alpha Pokemon to exist in the modern day. And here's another kicker to all of this. You can transfer alpha Pokemon from Legends Arceus to Scarlet and Violet. Though they get a marking as an alpha Pokemon, they do not retain their alpha size. To add to this, whenever you do catch an alpha Pokemon, they no longer keep their red eyes. They are calmed, no longer as aggressive, no longer rampaging. All of this should sound incredibly familiar to what is happening with the Rogue Mega phenomenon. Pokemon are so full of energy that they are a danger to everything around them. This even connects as far as knowing that without a trainer, Mega Pokemon simply can't control the amount of power flowing through them, which causes them to be in pain and makes them rampage in the first place. So how do we make sense of all of this? Because this is no different than the functions of 3 things that we usually keep separate when we talk about Pokemon actually. The move Minimize, Pokemon going into Pokeballs, and then Pokemon being able to Dynamax within Galar. To explain, Minimize isn't just a move that simply increases evasiveness. There is a beautiful and official Pokemon short where a wild Chansey uses Minimize while running across the water. The animation is phenomenal, and I kind of like the soft colors of the art style. Either way, it shows us that it is able to stay in this tiny state of being for quite some time. It might feel like common sense, but actually seeing it in action helps my brain. As for Pokeballs, while they technically force a Pokemon into them, the ability for a Pokemon to turn into light and enter the ball is something that belongs to Pokemon and not humanity. This started way back with the Pocket Monsters Encyclopedia, which notes the first capture of a Pokemon within a glass's case. This would then explain how people were able to capture Pokemon within balls made from apricorns, which had no technological pieces to them whatsoever. We can support this through not only their creation within Hisui and the lack of modern technology, but also through Kurt's creation of apricorn balls within Johto. In other words, Pokemon are beings of energy and are able to compress themselves down. So when we get to Galar and have the Dynamax phenomena, we can see how the opposite is also true. All because Dynamax energy is literally that, pure energy that is representative of radioactive energy, as we discussed. Though instead of terminal illness, we get giant Pokemon battles, which I would say, and I'm pretty sure you would agree too, is a massive win. Especially as the Pokemon who undergo this process literally become giants, at least until the Darkest Day happens and they all go wild and the world is destroyed, but that's neither here nor there. The only reason they can even Dynamax within the gyms is due to all of the gyms being built on power spots. Well, that is with the exception of Pierce's gym, which explains why he is unable to Dynamax his Pokemon. Though as a side, don't count Pierce out, because even without Dynamaxing, his Pokemon are able to hold their own against Raihan, who is the second best trainer in Galar until, we came along. Now, as one more side, because I have no idea when I'll be able to address this again or have the opportunity to, but within ZA, you can find out that ex-champion Leon, placing the event of ZA after Galar, and I'm pretty sure it's after the event of literally everything we know so far, specifically visited our place here in Lumiose City, and was more specifically visiting Jacinth. For what reasons are unknown, but we know Jacinth has some major sway in Kalos, likely has some form of proper royalty in her own right, not just having a ridiculous amount of wealth. And with the energy crisis of Galar, maybe he was visiting in order to find a way to resolve the crisis. And because Jacinth is actually a really, really strong Pokemon trainer, maybe he was even trying to find a way to use the energy created from Pokemon battles as something that can be harnessed in ways more than Dynamax is. Though unfortunately for him, it turns out that even when he entered a taxi within these lands, the taxi driver kept getting lost more and more, as if their spatial awareness was suddenly way off. Now, there is a taxi driver that gets very distracted within the game and doesn't know directions, but that's because she's brand new to driving and we are her first customer, which this means that for some ungodly reason, Palkia just looked down on Leon and said, yeah, you can get lost for eternity. Back on topic though, we've effectively proven that Pokemon can adjust their size according to their own abilities and how much power they have within their bodies, though with an excess amount, they become aggressive. And even after Giratina's effect is resolved at the end of Legends Arceus, these alpha Pokemon continue to exist, meaning that the effect is something that won't end immediately. It's something that will have to pass with time, something that has to be used up, which would explain as to why alpha Pokemon brought to the future would no longer retain their size. It's been used up over time. This leads us to what is effectively our semi-final point in all of this, how the alpha Pokemon gets fixed, and, well, it's actually no different than how the rogue Mega Pokemon problem is fixed. People have to quell the Pokemon, potentially even capture them, and then form a bond with them. And usually this will all be through the act of battling the Pokemon. Every time there's a rogue Mega, we battle it, they cough up a Mega Stone. This tells us that through enough Mega, or rather life energy being poured into their bodies, they were able to reach this form of evolution beyond what is normal for their bodies. While it is never directly stated, when we bring Mega Shards to Quizartico, we receive Mega Stones in return. As such, I like to make the conclusion that Mega Pokemon could even come in contact with or eat the Mega Shards, like rock candy, and eventually reach the Mega form as those shards solidify further, merge together, and create a hyper-dense form of energy known as our Mega Stone. Though not every Pokemon has the capacity to Mega Evolve, or maybe their bodies haven't adapted to the ability to use the energy, so that way they may use it effectively. Excess energy in the body should be gotten rid of quickly, or it could cause harm. That's the common sense idea that a body would then have thus the negative effect on rogue Pokemon. But for those unable to Mega Evolve, they still have all this extra energy built up inside of them. So they become larger, they become stronger, they become more aggressive, they unleash energy in large amounts in order to rid themselves of it. All being the same exact traits that Alpha Pokemon have. This just incredibly aggressive state of mind, and knowing once and for all that Xerneas not only creates Mega Pokemon, but attracted anomalous Alpha Pokemon into Lumiose, that tells us one of the last parts we needed to confirm their connection. The final confirmation is simply knowing that we have the words of Mabel herself. As she serves as acting professor within Lumiose, she studies the influx of Pokemon coming to Kalos. The wild zones being created aren't so that way Pokemon can be directly put into them like a zoo. They're being created because there are too many Pokemon coming into Kalos, looking for something and then creating a home here. All because they are attracted to the excess amounts of Mega energy that is coalescing within Lumiose City. Something we continue to see even after the main events of the game, as Area 20 is a place where Prism Tower no longer properly stands, and is a place where all sorts of final form Alpha Pokemon will appear, directly under the tower, even if they aren't commonly found in the area. And it is only through the use of the Holotech walls and adjusting some of the environments do we find a way to work towards balance between people and Pokemon. It is a slow process, but the major characters of Kalos all seem to want the same thing. The methods of reaching that final conclusion are of course different. It needs to be a place where coexistence can happen. That is their desire. A place where people and Pokemon can safely live together. But it isn't until Mega Energy, Alpha Pokemon, or more aptly, the flow of life energy as a whole can be understood that this can be achieved, which, you know what, we might be going to Unova to solve that pretty soon. But either way, as a little bit of an extra note, a flow of life can also be seen as aura, the same energy that Lucario can control, and the same energy that humanity has the potential to be able to control, at least within the anime. Meaning that this energy has never been exclusive to Pokemon. It's something that humanity can tap into, and is why a keystone is required for Mega Evolution, because through the balance and mixing of life energy, can it truly be controlled. In conclusion, all of this was to say that energy within the world of Pokemon is all derived from a singular form, and each Pokemon has a different way of transforming this singular ingredient into something different and new for other Pokemon to use. But we aren't quite done yet. I did not talk about Alola, because there's one more final piece of the puzzle that takes that final nail in the coffin and just sledgehammers it right through onto the other side, potentially breaking the coffin. And that is through what we find out with Zygarde's Mega Evolution. With Zygarde, we learn a big chunk of story of what happened within Kalos and what happened to it in Alola. For after saving people within Kalos from getting decimated by the ultimate weapon 5 years ago, Zygarde ran out of energy and split across the world. One of the places he visits, of course, or it visits, is Alola. And the very special trait that Zygarde has is that it absorbs the natural energy from the world itself, from all the different places that it visits. And you and I both know exactly what kind of energy is within Alola. For gracing the lands themselves is the light of Ultra Necrozma, a light that is known in many different forms. Ultra Aura, Z Crystals, and Z Power itself. And while many people like to claim that Ultra Beasts are not Pokemon, they very much are, and it's time to stop being stubborn. They can be caught in regular Pokeballs, and lore states that Pokeballs just have a hard time finding the Pokemon DNA within them, but it is there. And with us knowing that Zygarde is a Pokemon, it makes the next part all the more satisfying to everything we've discussed today. Nihil Light. The light that returns to nothing. A move that not only erases Hyper Rogue Angeflo White's ultimate Light of Ruin, which is effectively the beam of the ultimate weapon, but is also something that is named in antithesis to Ultra Necrozma's light that burns the sky. This Nihil Light being a move with a base power of 200, a move that is the only exclusive move to a Mega Evolved Pokemon, a move that is in fact a Z move without the use of a Z Crystal. Instead, the catalyst is Zygarde's Mega Stone, effectively showing that even this incredibly estranged and unnatural form of energy to our universe can still be converted through the innate abilities that Pokemon have as beings of energy. And not just through using the energy, but fully transforming it into something new. But that concludes what I have here. Thank you for watching. I hope I really didn't talk too much in circles and all of that made sense, because this has been sitting in my head for a long time. But it wasn't until Legends ZA that I could actually say it wasn't a coincidence, but actually prove that Alpha and Mega Pokemon are effectively the same. It's just how the Pokemon themselves use the energy. If you made it to the end here, thank you for watching. Please do make sure that you do subscribe for literal days worth of content. This is one of my shorter ones, of course. And in addition, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you have counter arguments? Do you agree and have additional supporting evidence? Not only do I love reading the comments, but comments and watch time are also the #1 way to boost the reach of a video. And again, you can always hype the video as well within the first week of release. If you'd like to go the extra mile, become a member for $3 a month, and you get a number of perks, such as hearing your name shouted out at the end credits of every video, which we're going to go do right now. I'm totally sitting in a chair. Don't overthink it. We're going to thank all of the members of the channel, though, starting with the Gods of Hope, Krill, Fan of Fantasy 14, Heroes for Life, Biggins, Vatty, Nip, Buzz, and Summer, then the Champions, Neas, Ghost and Joshua, Biggins, Wilson, then the Knights of the Code, Crumbo, Vatty, Lemon, Zoomster, Kelsey, Hoover Covers, Look Sassy, Vio, Shiny Gems, Sarah Birdswoods, Fix My Itinerary, Krill, Fan of Fantasy 14, Wow, Alan, Heroes for Life, Bass, Molder, Blue Dalek, and Warren Hepfel. Then every single wanderer of the channel, Yagal, Cal, Star S, Luminum, Malroth, Zacharwood, Rita, Yon, Samarfe Nedra, the names throw me off because they go from real to fake to real to fake. I'm assuming anything. Starbreed, Bob D. Fish, Gangle, Fred, Tyrone Jones, Electro, Lucario, Live R360, Bex, Nicole Macayo, Justin Patrick, Brian, or Just Bad, Brian Millie, CGA, Planet Bob, Evan, Electric Solar, Beelzebub Bay, Ruby, Jalandine, The Sporty Ampers, Links, Keep Moving Forward, Suki, 232, The Black Dragon, Nit, Ruthless Hauser, Michael Stein, J. Gill, Jacob Square, Mr. Helagonolips, Super Saiyan Sun, Goku, Vanny, Samaru, Max Supreme, Shadow Hawk 19, Lost Mysteria, Zakai, Pyromaster, Abdallah Aladi, Gaming Gurus 9L707 of Evil Chan, Micah 636 Gaming, Nicole Manassi, and Kristen, Sandwich Boss, Emmy, whatever this is, a little Figment, Medico TA73, Sydney House, Miss Zora, Dakota Couch, Brad Sundimer, Drixel, Carl Jean, Hunter Allen, Isaiah Kasam, Rebecca O'Connell, Hugh, Tappy W, Mentor, Mora, Marshy, Edward Kosowski, Federica Fox, Hag, Addy Cadabra, King Pie, Jack of Frost, Restless Ivy, Addy C, DJ Monk 23, Squidwater, Rice Smith, Gamer, Jeff JM, MD Horse with a Cocktail, Muse Artwill, Telumiel, Eastgander, 072, Andrew Frost, Speak Anonymous, Summit Sloth, The Knock, Ian Ray, Big and C9, Corner of the Comics, Sleepy Bear, Jericho, Michael Vale, Unseelie King, Defornian Skies, Daniel Tracy, Garrett Hoffman, Dylan Peters, Malachi Burkhardt, and Heather Weiss. And thank you all for being wanderers. So members of the channel, oh my goodness, hey, you're not all wanderers, you're at different tiers, but nevertheless, it goes a huge difference in everything. And by the time you guys are seeing this, I'm actually out on my first vacation in 2 years after working like 50 to 60 hours a week between like YouTube and other stuff that I have to do. So thank you. Hope you enjoyed, and I hope you enjoy the next video that comes out after this, because it's going to be a long one. I'm going to try and get the entire story of ZA cut down into a singular video. So that's this one's short. That one's going to be a long one. I don't know what else to say. My brain is ever so slightly fried from a long morning. But again, as always, don't think I want to do, don't think I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!